Hello, welcome to 5 Minute Lore, where I explain lore in 5 minutes. Today we'll be talking about Grom the Paunch from Warhammer Fantasy Battles. We will go over Grom's history and his Waaagh. Grom the Paunch is what all goblins want to be. He's big, he's mean, and he's got a nice chariot. Grom led arguably the mightiest Waaagh in goblin history. It went from the Badlands, all around the Empire, and even managed to invade the High Elf home of Ulthuan. This mighty green-skinned warlord had humble beginnings. Grom was not always large, but a small, pitiful goblin. His tribe, the Broken Axes, did not have a Waaagh going on, so they decided to have an eating contest. Little Grom, no, not that one, decided to join in. After a bit, the tribe decided to up the stakes and dared Grom to devour raw troll meat. Trolls are known for their powerful regenerative powers, and so eating their meat raw is a death sentence. You're basically a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. All of Grom's tribe watched excitedly as Grom's belly got larger, sure he would explode soon. Unfortunately for his tribe, but fortunately for Grom, he didn't blow up. He managed to digest the troll meat and grow to the size of an orc, if not bigger than some of them. He also gained regenerative powers and the flatulence of a troll. This made him the new leader of his tribe. With his newfound power, Grom would challenge the surrounding green-skinned tribal leaders to combat, besting them and taking their tribes into his. After all the fighting, Grom was tired. He was a big guy after all, so he decided to sit down and take a rest. He happened to sit on one unlucky night goblin by the name of Niblet. Grom was expecting him to have not survived the encounter with his behind, but much to his surprise, the goblin lived. Niblet was promoted to Grom's lucky standard bearer as a result. After uniting the tribes around him, Grom did what any good greenskin would do and picked a fight with the dwarfs. Grom was very successful and wiped out a couple Dawi holds. He even managed to vandalize one of their statues. The Dawi were in desperate need of aid and contacted the Empire for help combating Grom. The Empire did what any good friend would do in this situation, and moved their capital as far away as possible and didn't lift a finger to help. During this time, Grom would discover chariots and become infatuated with them. Eventually, Grom's Waaagh got bored of Dawi and decided to look for new opponents to fight. He decided the Empire was a nice choice and began raiding their lands. He eventually made it to their old capital of Nuln, which had plenty of shinies for him and his boys, as well as race fields for his chariots. Grom was happy. This was the life. He decided to settle down in Nuln, which was not very orky, so naturally a good portion of his Waaagh left to go fight their own battles. These smaller green-skinned bands were much more manageable and were defeated by the Empire. Grom's retirement in Nuln was going well until Grom heard the voice of Gork, or Mork, himself speak to him. "Go west, young git," the voice boomed. Grom quickly assembled his Waaagh and left Nuln. They were on their way to the coastline when the army of Midland attempted to stop them. They were pretty easily run over by what was left of Grom's Waaagh. Even though it had lost a good portion, it was still massive. Much to Grom's horror, however, his chariot was destroyed by a lucky hit from a Midlander cannon. Luckily for Grom, the great city of Middenheim was nearby. The citizens of Middenheim prepared for the worst, expecting their city to be razed and have much death and pillaging. Instead, Grom just tore down a part of the Temple of Ulrich to rebuild his chariot and left. Eventually, Grom's Waaagh would finally reach the Empire's coastline in Nordland. He commanded his boys to create a mighty fleet to sail the seas with. So, Nordland was pillaged for good wood for shipbuilding. It was a good ride and proper time, and if anyone said otherwise, they were eaten by Grom and his goblins. After the fleet was completed, they began their voyage. The Imperial Navy would find their fleet, and the battle went how you would expect it would. Ships built by goblins aren't exactly the highest grade, especially compared to the Empire's. Many ships would be lost, and when a massive storm occurred separating them, much of Grom's Waaagh was destroyed. But not all was lost, for they had made landfall after many days and nights at sea. They managed to land on the elven homeland of Ulthuan, specifically in the region of Yvres. This was incredibly lucky because Yvres was one of the weaker provinces, and landing on Ulthuan is incredibly tough considering it has magical barriers around it. Grom had a shaman buddy by the name of Blacktooth, who started hearing funny voices in his head telling him where Grom needed to go. And these voices were not the usual ones that green-skinned shamans hear. The voices told Blacktooth to destroy magical stones that were used to keep the Chaos Gods at bay. If it's not obvious already, Blacktooth was being influenced by the Chaos Gods. Grom didn't really know where to go, so he just listened to his shaman and had a fun time pillaging. After destroying many of the magical waystones, Grom and his forces would begin a siege of the main city of Yvres, Tor Yvres. Despite being sparsely populated, it was home to some of the more elite High Elf warriors known as the Mistwalkers. They've experienced fighting the demons of chaos and fought valiantly against Grom's horde. Although he took many casualties, Grom managed to win, and his Waaagh pillaged Tor Yvres, killing many elves and destroying much of the city. Grom's shaman abandoned his master's army to further destabilize reality for his new gods. When all hope seemed lost for the High Elves, reinforcements arrived, led by Eltharion. Eltharion and his mages would put an end to the Blacktooth schemes and destroy the remainders of Grom's Waaagh. No one knows what happened to Grom after this. The elves claimed he fled the city and tried to build a boat back home and drowned. Some greenskins claim Grom managed to escape on his shaman's wyvern, or rode a magical chariot away to bide his time for a new Waaagh. No one knows his true fate. However, in Total War Warhammer, he did survive his battle with Eltharion and wants revenge. He either escaped to the Southlands or Bretonnia, depending on your campaign choice. Apparently, in 6th edition, a goblin named Git Guzzler had a one-sided rivalry with Grom. He actually shows up in Grom's quest battle in Total Warhammer, which is neat. However, just like how he was a footnote in Grom's history, he's just a footnote in this video too. That's the story of the biggest, meanest goblin out there. If I forgot something important, let me know in the comments. If this was interesting, I recommend doing more research.